Hello, everyone. Look, we
Hey,
are live. Hey, Richard, how's it going?
I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Fantastic.
Yes. So, we are live now on my LinkedIn and YouTube, and also the um, official Oscars channel.
The Oscars, the
Yes, the
official
Oscars,
Oscars,
the
the
official
official Oscars.
Oscars of open source. The OSSCCARs. Maybe it's the pirate
Oscars.
pirate version. Yeah.
Maybe. Sounds like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the pirate version.
Yeah.
But anyway, so here we are with our zero watchers right now, which is, um, always going to happen in the first episode, right? So,
Mm. Oh, we have somebody in, I think.
that was me, actually. I just jumped in to
Oh,
make sure it actually
okay.
worked, to make sure we were
Oh,
actually live. So,
well, I think I can see
oh,
somebody
oh,
called
Edith
Edith.
is in as well. So,
Edith
hello,
is
Edith.
in. She's
Yeah,
in
I
the
don't know if
house.
yeah. So Edith is here. Hello, Edith. So anyway, so today why don't we tell you a little bit about what we're doing in case people find this after the fact. So
Yeah.
Richard and I got together at the State of Open Con, and we were chatting about things like what do you do for videos, what sort of equipment do you use, what works, what doesn't work. And so we were like, hey, we should just get on and talk about this so everyone can participate and share. And so we're like,
Yep.
we're in the open source space, so we could call it open source content creators. And then it was like, wouldn't it be cool if we called it the Oscars because it was Oscar season?
It
And so,
was. I think so.
yeah, yeah.
I think so.
And then
You kind of started the acronym, and then I think I added in the last bit of it.
yeah, because I couldn't figure out
That
like
was
what the R
my
was.
claim to fame.
Like
That was
we
my
needed an
contribution.
R because it was open source
Yes,
content creators. Yeah, so
creators.
it's like
Yeah,
OSCC
and then we said
and
reviewers.
reviewers, because reviewers are
Yeah,
also doing content when they review people's content for them and help them out. So it's
true,
always good.
true. And we might end up doing reviews of our own, white papers, other people's demos, events that we've been to,
Never know.
good bars that we've come across in our
Yes,
travels. You never
always
know.
good to have those bars and everything else. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, we do everything on the Oscars channel.
yes, because
Unlike the Oscars, which that's just as films, we do everything,
yes,
including bars,
yes,
great bars around
everything.
the world.
There we have no limits, zero
Yep,
limits.
indeed.
All right, so I figure today we'll probably start small and just kind of get everybody used to it, and we're still working out the kinks ourselves. So
Yep.
we'll figure out like how to get this distributed a bit easier, maybe work on the graphics and the background for this a little better.
Yes.
But just because we are talking about content and streaming and everything else, just so
Mm.
everybody's aware, right now this is all happening over Restream. So
Ah, there you go.
there you go. And not only is
Cool platform.
yes, not only is that happening over Restream, the normal kind of like setup at my desk here, you can see the background that I always have. So we're generally going to share best practices as we learn them. Now, if
Mm.
you're not familiar, you might not know that Richard has a channel, and Richard's channel is the Cloud Therapist channel. So, yep. And so if you look at the upper right-hand corner, there is a QR code that you can grab and go right to his channel and subscribe.
Oh, Matt, you're so prepared.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just
In fact, check this
this is
out.
like
Check
phenomenal.
this out. Okay. Look,
Go on, go on.
look at the bottom of the
Whoa,
screen. It's directing you to Richard's
cool.
channel. So
Wow.
you can,
Add class therapist. There you go.
yeah, yeah. So there you go. Um, so
Perfect.
we've got the Cloud Therapist link. We've got the scrolling thing. So, you
Got
can
it
check
all
those
here.
things out. If you're interested, I also have my own podcast. So we'll go ahead and we'll throw up mine right above that. So you said that's my podcast
Woohoo.
right there. We're trying all the toys today, all the bells and whistles,
All of
all
them.
of them.
I'm gonna try
all of
everything.
them,
I'm gonna try
right?
everything.
So we'll go ahead and we'll shut those down so they're not as distracting. But I'll even like flip up my podcast QR code in case you wanted to grab that as well. So
Oh, brilliant!
cool,
Look at
right?
that preparation. Look at that
Yeah, I mean, I'm
preparation.
prepared here today. So one of the things we wanted to talk about, and Richard, this is something that I've been really kind of struggling and coming to grips with lately. And
Well, you've come to the
I
therapist,
know,
so
I know I'm coming to the
there you
therapist.
go,
That's
in
always
the
fun.
right place.
Yeah. So it's, as I've gone out and, keep in mind, everybody, I've been in the open source space for 20 plus years now. And so, and I've been doing content for most of those 20 years, but really focused on the content and creation of content over the last, let's say, 5 years. Coming from, previous company, we had about 12,000 YouTube subscribers, right? Um, and and we had about 200,000 people who would view our website and our content on a regular basis. So really popular blog,
Right.
right? So we had a fairly big audience. And so coming back to that, uh, is something that when you switch jobs, that audience that was built for that company isn't necessarily the same. So
Yeah.
I've been noticing that I have to reset my expectations around some of what my content can generate.
Right.
And that's been a little challenging, um, quite honestly.
Mm.
And I don't know if you have had that experience as well, but you look at bigger companies and you look at live streams from different folks. You're like, wow, how did they get like 2,000 people?
Yeah.
And it's like, why am I not getting 2,000 people? And then you look at it like, well, maybe you're just not in that same space. So the space that I was in before was databases. And
Right.
if you're a developer, databases are kind of boring. So I guess
Has. Yeah.
you think they're boring?
No, they're just PaaS, platform as a service, right? So yeah,
Yeah. Well.
yeah, it's like it's just I need a database PaaS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
In the background.
and what's weird is like, so you look at somebody who's doing like live coding, or you look at somebody who's doing certain streams, and some of them don't have many, but there are some that have really really wide channels. And you're like, there's like 15,000 people, who watched, or maybe there's like only 1,000 people. But then at the database side, I was doing live streams, and we would be lucky to get, 20, 30 people on a stream. And then maybe like 300 to 500 people would watch it after. And so that was like, ooh, wow, that's pretty good. But it was still that kind of like, well, but there's these other people who've got so much more. Why do they have so much more? And it's difficult sometimes, to see that, right? And to come to grips with it. And now at the company that I'm at, so I went from focusing on databases to focusing on open source businesses and those who are trying to build a business or grow the adoption of their open source project, which if you think of a company, they have 1,000 developers, let's say, or 100 developers even. They might only have 10 people who are SREs, DevOps people who care about the PaaS or the database, right? Like deeply enough to care. But at those companies, there might be only 2 or 3 people, even that, maybe just one, who cares about like growing the business specifically and is targeted with that, kind of mantra of how do I get more open source adoption or more users?
Yeah. It's a big question. I think it's probably has a big answer as well. I think, I mean, for me, overall, my experience has maybe been kind of slightly different from sort of yours, and certainly in terms of the background and sort of motivations, really. But generally speaking, I think we're in the sort of ever decreasing circles, and that's why I think certain platforms or channels or subjects or whatever are much more interesting, much more wider scope than perhaps what you and I might be doing, or somebody else who might want to start a channel might be doing. So technology itself is kind of not not everybody understands that. So you kind of maybe start there, and then you get sort of closer and closer to kind of where you are, and then that obviously means that your audience is much smaller than MKBHD's or Mr. Beast or somebody like that.
Well,
So I think that's the natural sort of aspect of it,
well,
really.
and that's an interesting point, because it's really difficult to compare yourself outside of the tech space, number one, and you shouldn't, right? So the likelihood that you are going to show someone how to do something cool in Python or even JavaScript, and you're going to get like 2 million views, it's just not going to happen unless you're doing something like so groundbreaking that you can reach out beyond the tech space.
I'm going to hack into China and launch all their nukes or something,
that would be a very bad example, but yes, okay, like don't do that. Nobody, don't encourage people, Richard.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yes, don't encourage people.
Like, let's cut that back.
Yeah. Government agents are on their way to your door right now.
Right now.
Yeah.
Is that the knock on the door? Oh my god.
But no, I think it's an interesting point. Like, you can't compare yourselves to some of these other folks out there. But what's also interesting is this kind of rise of influencer marketing. Okay. So as people do start to grow their channels and get more views, a lot of them focus on just growing their channel. Okay.
Yeah.
And what that means is, like, that's how they make money, right? That's their primary focus. They're not doing it as part of a day job. They're not doing it just for like a hobby. They're not doing it, as even DevRel in some cases. What they're doing it as specifically is, I'm going to try and monetize. And now on YouTube, there's ways to monetize, and Twitch, there's ways to monetize, and it requires you to have so many watch hours, so many followers, so many people who are, watching us live,
subscribed, and so on. Yeah.
So there's a ton of people who are out there doing that. And that influencer marketing is weird, because what you said is the circles get smaller. If I was, for instance, to go out and find a influencer who's got, let's say, 100,000 subscribers, it would be very unlikely that their subscribers would care about what I'm pitching. And and a lot of those folks are very broad in the tech space. And I will tell you, I have hired some of them before to do projects for me.
Right.
So, I've run conferences before, and you want help, getting people to the conference, or so you want suggestions, you want to use them, like that type of thing. And I have had very little success in some of those. Right. And it's just because it's the wrong audience, I think. Right. It's not the audience that is necessarily going to follow, like, what, like a database conference or something.
Yeah.
And I think when people see like large numbers, they want to kind of plug into that, and that's cool. But I think you have to realize is, the larger the numbers, the broader the audience, the less specific they're going to be. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's, like I said, in all of those sort of layers, there's challenges along the way. And I tend to look at kind of where we are as a sort of in the sort of IT space, not in the tech space. I would put MKBHD in the tech space, because he does like phone reviews and whatever, gadget reviews and things like that. So that in itself is you kind of cut out a whole bunch of audience that come to these platforms and just browse and whatever. So that's kind of, like I said, starts those decreasing circles. And then it depends again if you're an indie. So there are people who actually put themselves, as you're quite right, who are sort of in this space and actually do it for IT companies. So they are, this is their bread and butter. This is exactly what they do. They don't have a 9 to 5. This is it. They are a broadcaster. They are a host, and other companies who are in the IT space can hire them to host their talks, host their live streams, or whatever else they want to do. I think the only thing I would maybe, what I tend to look at is kind of, when you're doing a channel, especially on kind of YouTube, not only do you kind of, yeah, you need to kind of work out what your, what you want to do and what your audience is, and and kind of focus on something that that you enjoy doing, or maybe have a passion, ideally. uh, but also I tend to kind of look at the other channels that are outside of the IT space, just to see how they do things. I think that's really useful to do. Now, we can't really take, like I said, everything that they do and bring it into, into your channel. You certainly can't do that from day one. Um, but there are certain techniques opt. So I certainly, the way I sort of, try and do my stuff on my channel is to try and emulate some of those ideas of those people that are outside. So yes, we can't review, we can't be talking about Python and Kubernetes today and then review the latest, Samsung phone tomorrow or something. That's just crazy. Those are just two separate worlds of tech. But we can sort of, make the thumbnail slicker, or add in some music, or do our editing a little bit better, and stuff like that. So and that, those kind of techniques you can bring in. The other thing is, obviously, when you're doing it yourself, it's just you. So you've got to do all the recording and editing, and graphics, and choose the music and whatever else you need to do, whatever level of production you want to put into a recording, and then obviously put it out there, as well as doing the promo afterwards, the promotion of that, and whatever channels you have, Facebook, Twitter, etc., etc. So if you're a kind of one-man band, then yes, you're kind of just doing all that stuff yourself. But some of the success of what you mentioned about people having like 1,000 followers, or 500 people viewing their live stream or something, it's not always just the tech, but it's also because there are multiple people, and there's potentially kind of marketing people behind driving the um, driving their traction towards that live stream that company is going to do as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think you make a really good point. For many of us, we don't have large teams, right? You're solo. I pretty much am
Mm-hmm.
solo right now. Um, I think that, in the past, I might have had one or two people who are helping out specifically with
Mm.
content, doing some editing or doing some releases and stuff like that. But it hasn't been like this massive team.
Mm.
And a lot of it is trial and error,
Yep.
and seeing what works, what doesn't work, and looking at metrics, looking at like the analytics that are part of your different socials, or different places you're distributing content.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, to be honest with you, I think I was probably more, more organized like that when I first started. And I looked at I watched lots of videos, hours and hours of other people saying how to start a channel, and I read some blogs, and mostly watched kind of other people's videos and so on. But more recently, a lot of the messaging that I get from those more, certainly, infinitely more successful, folks on YouTube and Twitch and whatever, is that they're saying, do the thing that you really want to do. Like I said before, it's kind of, is this something that you want to do, or do you actually have a passion for it? And I guess you're somewhere on that spectrum, and that's fine. But do it as in, you're kind of doing it for, you're kind of doing it for yourself, and do it as if it's something that you enjoy doing, or you have a passion in, and you want to do it, versus having to say, well, I've got to look at every little statistic, and where's my traffic coming from, and these people viewed the third minute of a 10-minute video more than and that's kind of a little bit too much to begin with. My thing is to kind of say, put out what you feel, yeah, I mean, do a decent job, but put out what you enjoy putting out, and then kind of build it gradually.
Yeah, and I think that's good advice for people who are starting out. I
Mm.
think there's a balance though, and I think the balance comes in. It depends on why you're doing what you're doing. Okay. So like me, number one, I do enjoy doing it, but
Mhm.
it's also my job, right? Which
Mhm.
makes it a little different from some of those
Yeah.
folks on, YouTube or Twitch, because it is something that ultimately I'm responsible for growing the audience and getting more people interested in what, Scarf, the company that I work for, their product.
Yeah.
And that's cool. And
Mhm.
if I can combine my two passions, that's awesome. Happy to do it. And I think that though makes it a little more nuanced because, in some cases, like, are you seeing that growth, right?
Yeah.
Are you getting a few more subscribers? Are you getting more views? What content works and doesn't work?
Mm.
And that's an interesting thing, because I can tell you specifically, looking at, um I'm still trying to figure it out, right? There's the
Mhm.
magic answer. And over 5 years, I've talked to a lot of people in the DevRel space and the community space. I've done a lot of podcasts. If you count the ones at Percona and the ones here, I've done over 100 podcasts. I've talked with hundreds of people who are responsible for kind of like content development and growth.
Mhm.
And no one really has an answer that works for everybody. And everyone doesn't really know how to measure the effectiveness of what they're doing. It's a challenge for a lot of
Yeah.
people.
Yes, it can be. Yes, I do agree, and I think that's a we have a I think that's a good juxtaposition that your focus is not just kind of on a sort of a personal level, but it's also on a on an organizational level as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Whereas really my approach is, I started because I had more time on my hands during the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns and so
Yeah.
on.
You do it because you like it.
And yeah, and I do it because I enjoy doing it. But it's kind of the motivation has morphed a little bit since the beginning, and that's fine because I was always, bemoaning certain things to friends and colleagues in the industry, and always had an opinion on something. And I think they got tired of me kind of WhatsApping them and talking to them over a beer or something. I said, well, why don't you just write a blog,
Yeah.
And I said, well, actually, maybe I could do that. And I did try that. And, I did a Medium, and you can probably find one or two articles that I've written as cloud therapist on Medium. But I found that process a little bit more um, sticky in terms of kind of trying to really articulate what I wanted. Sometimes I'd read something back and go, I didn't really say that very well. And it's just not kind of real time enough for me. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe I should just do it on a YouTube channel. Why don't I do it as a video? And then it kind of just kind of went from there. So I did a couple, um, at the beginning, and like everybody's first video, including MKPHD, who does remind people, when he does put up his first video sometimes, which is quite gracious of him to do that.
Yeah.
They were probably not fantastic. They were probably quite terrible, and that's fine because you're kind of trying things out. You're not going to be perfect from day one,
No, never, never.
unless you, yeah, yeah. It's even if you rehearse it 1,000 times, it's just not going to work out. So just go with it. Just try it and have a go. And I think, and that's exactly what I did really. But then I found that I didn't want to kind of just monologue myself on all these things. I kind of wanted to get somebody's opinion, or actually found people that I thought, oh, it'd be really nice to have a chat with them. Why don't I do a Zoom video with them and kind of put that up on the channel?
Yeah.
And it kind of snowballed. The idea really sort of snowballed from there. And like I said, the motivation started, as purely selfish and personal for me. And maybe I think probably my friends and some colleagues were quite relieved that I wasn't kind of pestering them on these subjects anymore. I had a
Yeah.
kind of an outlet for for what I wanted.
So okay, so Richard, let's change gears a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think advice, just from what we were talking about, a couple things to takeaways before I switch. Number one, don't compare yourself to projects that aren't in a similar space. It'll just
Mm.
discourage you, right? So if you're getting 5 views, 10 views, 100 views, whatever,
Mm.
if you're moving and making progress, in producing good content, and you're just trying to figure out the right combination, continue with that. Don't compare yourself
Yeah.
to someone who's got an audience a million times your size or in a completely different
Yeah.
demographic.
Yeah.
Also, focus on what you like doing. I think, if you're doing this,
Passion.
for a company's sake, try to bring in what your passion is, but also try to iterate and get better and learn from one another. And because we're in the open source space, share, right? Like share
Yeah.
what's working and what isn't.
Yeah.
I think those are all really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. And I think, like, so my only point is, do learn some of the techniques of the other people that are not in our space. I think those are useful, and take heart from what they say when they say, you'll be on this, you can be on this platform for years before you sort of get anywhere. And like I said, because we're in that space, that's not really for everybody. That's kind of, you've already kind of got things against you,
Yeah.
from right from the start.
Yeah. And a good, a guy that used to work with a friend of mine, he said, with open source, a lot of it is speaking to an empty room until the room fills up. And that speaking to an empty room, you might have to do that, for a long time before you get
Yeah.
traction.
Yeah, and I've seen just one extra point. I mean, I have seen people that I did come across one a few months ago. I think it was a Brazilian channel or something. It wasn't an English channel, but it was tech. It was Kubernetes and GitOps and all the kind of. But the guy was presenting it in that sort of, Mr. Beast kind of style, or a non-tech style. So so that channel has certainly adopted that sort of approach. But that requires a team. It's not just one person doing that, because the editing and all the stuff that he was doing requires a huge amount of time.
Yeah. And that brings us to our next topic, which I wanted to talk a little
Ta-da!
bit about, videos, right? And creating videos
Videos.
and whatnot. And so we'll just call this the video advice segment, right? Or
Video
whatever we want to call
advice.
it.
Video advice. Yeah.
So if you have not seen, and this is not a shameless plug, I'm actually going to use what I'm going to share. You know, I do a lot of content, probably more than I should. But I try to drop several clips and videos a week. And how I'm approaching this is I want to have meaningful conversations with executives, with people founding companies. And so we have the Hacking Open Source Business podcast, Avi and myself. And so we're trying to get one interview a week published. All right. And these are generally an hour long. Some of them are shorter depending on the circumstances, but think 30 minutes to an hour. Nobody has time for that on YouTube. Very few people. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know about your average video length watch time, but if I have a good video, it's like, 3 to 5 minutes, maybe, a little above that. But a lot of times when I have a lot of views that show up on YouTube, it's people who jump in and bounce out. Especially if I do any sort of like promotion or try to promote like paid advertising type of thing for something, I get a lot of crap. Like it's just people who don't really care about it. They just click in for whatever reason and bounce out.
Yeah.
But when you have an hour-long episode, that is a lot of content, and a lot of people can't consume that content, right? And so my episode, like if I look, like I've got some episodes that have 500 views. I have one that has over 1,000 views. I've got a lot that have like a couple hundred, and then I've got some that just have like 100, right? So it's all over the board. Depends on the topic, the person, how much promotion you put in. So it's not consistent for me. Overall the channel has about 500 subscribers. Most of the people who watch aren't subscribers, ironically. So I don't know. It's kind of weird. I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But one of the things that I try to do is take that long form content and break it into smaller clips. And so Richard, I don't know if you do this, but are you using chapters at all in your videos?
I think YouTube does the auto. There's an auto chapter thing, so
Yeah,
I
so
leave it
there is, but it's
to
not
YouTube.
great generally. So if I
Mm.
click into like this one here, we'll just do this one here. I
Yeah,
actually uploaded my own chapters.
right.
So I don't know if you know, like it's fairly straightforward to do that. But each one of these chapters became a separate clip. Because one of the things that YouTube doesn't do a really good job of is like there's no way to promote each of these chapters without like, you know, just taking that particular like you know,
Mm.
time code and then pushing it out. But what I found is some of these episodes, okay, um, are actually getting more traction in the clip portion of it, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so if I look, for instance, um, this clip, you know, comparing MongoDB to Canonical, who's more open, MongoDB or
Mm.
Canonical, right? That's an interesting question. I got 121 views on that, but the full
Hmm.
podcast got 114 views. So
Right.
again, uh, the smaller clip in that case worked pretty well, but then I only got 2 views
Mm.
on this next one.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so the clips are, you know, hit or miss. Generally I'll get 2 or 3 clips that do really well and could even
Mm.
exceed the full podcast, and then I'll get a lot of clips that just don't matter. So
Yeah.
clips are great, but they are time consuming to build in a lot of cases. Are
They
you,
can be, yes.
yeah, are you doing any clips or are you just doing the full episode?
No, I do. I mean, I've already decided to diversify my channel to multiple segments, as I would call them. So I have
Yes.
certain channel segments that are um, that repeat. They come around, you know, as and when I have the content or I want to do more of this rather than that segment, they happen. And then there's the normal ones which I roughly try to keep to an hour if I can, or less, ideally. But I can certainly run into, you know, run to an hour. What I do tend to do with those that will are just kind of on the channel as they are. They're not in a particular segment or anything, and that is a little bit more rare these days because not many of the topics kind of, you know, I want to run for over an hour or around an hour. So unless somebody else, I did a panel thing. I think it was last year, and then the company that I did the panel with were kind enough to share the recording with me. But the whole discussion that we did was nearly, I think, 2 hours or
Mm,
something. So I
yeah,
ended up doing a part one and part two
fair enough.
for that. And I put that out as kind of two 45-minute segments or something like that. So, yeah, so anything that's kind of going around to an hour, I would probably consider breaking it up into part one, part two. It also means if you're a little bit more scarce with, you know, with your content, then you could maybe release part one this week and promote that, and then release part two the following week, and then promote that as well. So that kind of maybe adds a bit of anticipation for your viewers. They kind of watched part one, and they kind of, you know, have to wait a little bit of time to see part two and so on. But then the like I said, the segments I've created, I've specifically targeted, you know, the kind of the shorter attention span that, you know, potentially people will have, and because they just have time to consume an hour or let's say an hour and a half or more of time.
Yeah.
So those segments, the idea with those for me on my channel is that if somebody, you know, if one of my subscribers or anybody who's coming along, they'll eventually get the idea that if they see this video that's in this particular segment, and I name the segments so that people can distinguish between them. You know, it doesn't kind of, you don't kind of play the video and then they go, oh, that's the 15-minute segment. Okay, no, it's actually got a name for that. So there is kind of, you know, certain um, names for them. Um, if they see that particular name for that segment, they know that it's in that segment. And if they are kind of following the channel, probably most of the subscribers aren't, but those who do are kind of aware of that level of detail. They will know that that talk is pretty much going to be 15 minutes or less. So they can then say, okay, well, I'll download that and then I'll watch that on the train when I'm going into the office or
Fair enough.
coming back home, or, when I'm driving, when my wife is driving somewhere, I'll watch it in the car, whatever, right? Or I'll just, it's 15 minutes. I can watch it now while I'm, washing the dishes or something, whatever it is that they're doing, or cooking or something. So, the segments kind of help you to define, what the for your audience as well as for yourself as well. Because if I sit down with somebody and I say, look, this is going to be one of those 15-minute ones, right? So my whole discussion with that person needs to be in 15 minutes or less. I mean, if it's 2 minutes, that's fine. If it's 5 minutes, that's fine. As long as it's not over 15 minutes. It needs to be around the 15 minutes and it needs to finish.
Yeah. And so, I don't have a targeted kind of like segment, but I am doing multiple types of videos. So like this week I've launched, I did not only the podcast, but I'm doing these event videos. So, I've got a couple event videos that were released this week. I've got some other things that are specifically for the company that are on a different channel than this. This particular channel that we're looking at here, it's about 5 months old. So 500 subscribers in 5 months, it's pretty decent, right? That's a pretty good growth.
That's very good.
Yeah. Especially, in this particular segment. And, getting, a couple hundred views per video and a few that even have way more than that. It's hit or miss on the topic. But my strategy right now, I think, and what I'm trying is the 50-minute video and then break that up into 10 to 15 smaller clips, all that are promoted separately, as well as my other videos. But that takes a lot of time. So I have been exploring AI and tools to help with this. So Chat GPT. And so what I want to do is I'll show you like my tool set. And I don't know if you do this or if I'm just unique, but so let me kind of walk through. Now, are you using anything for transcription right now?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean the approach that I'm taking is on like things like chapters. It's I leave that to YouTube to do, and the main reason I'm doing that is because I want to personally curate the messages that I want to put out in the video, and that takes me a little bit of time really to kind of figure out what do I want to say. Do I want to put out this particular segment when I asked the guest about this particular question? I asked them a particular question and they answered the question. Then I go, okay, so is that something I really want to put out? I don't know, and then I'll kind of think about it for a bit. And then if I do want to do that, then I'll go about sort of, putting out that particular segment.
So let me show you what I'm doing. So Descript is a tool that I found and started using about a year ago. And so Descript is kind of cool. Because what I can do is I can drop in a video. And so this is a video with Kai Arno, CEO of the MariaDB Foundation. So this is the next episode that I'm working on to release. So this should be released next week. I've also got a couple others that I'm working on. But when you drop it in here, it will ask you, like it will detect the different speakers and then it will automatically set the person who is speaking. Okay. Which is kind of cool. But it also, you get the video of it as well. And what's really neat about this is, let's say I want to get this clip that says, and our goal is, we always talk about openness, adoption. And let's say this sounds like a really good clip for me. Okay. All I have to do is highlight it and then I can duplicate it to a new composition.
Yeah.
And it will it edits just that section of the video out. And so I can save just that video based on the transcript, which is really cool. Okay. So I do like that, but I was doing that and it was still taking too long. So my current approach is as you go through here, you can add what is called chapters, or like the bookmarks basically. And so you could see that
Yeah.
there's different bookmarks along the side here. But as you do that, you can just add a new chapter here, and fill in the marker of the chapter with whatever you want it to say.
Yeah.
The tool actually has the capability then to export the videos based on each marker, and it will create one video for each
Right.
of those chapters, those markers, which
Hmm.
saved me a ton of time. So the last 3
Yeah.
episodes I've been doing that.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and that's certainly, I think, if you are extremely short on time, you still want to do this, but you're extremely short on time, and you want to automate certain aspects of that, then yes, that would certainly definitely be useful for it. Yeah.
well, and so what this enables me to also do is, if there is something that I think is really good, um, if I know it's in a section, so there's a section on let's see, collecting and listening to community feedback, right?
Yeah.
I could go back through here and I can read, like, and try and find exactly what he said that was really interesting and pull that out.
Mm.
Okay.
Hmm.
So anyway, so quick tip. It's kind of cool to be able to edit based on the transcript.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. But the the problem is, if you do it this way, in this case, I'll probably end up with 12 different videos. That means 12 different
Right.
descriptions, 12 different titles, 12 different thumbnails.
Mm. Okay.
So that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is where
I agree.
I've started the last couple of weeks exploring using Chat GPT for this. Okay.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and so let me show you what I'm doing. Okay. And so, I can zoom in a little bit here just so it's a little easier to see on the screen. Um, and so this is where I've started doing some prompts here. So let's see. So that's my transcript. Oh, here's my prompts. Okay. So I'm asking for things like, okay, I'm going to ask you to summarize a video. So let me just, I'll type in my prompts. You can, and we can try this. Okay. So,
Hmm.
all right. And I don't know if you know how Chat GPT works. It works on tokens. Tokens are basically like words. So it limits the number of words you can send in. But it also, if you send in too many, it will forget some things. So you have to be careful with how many requests you put in at once.
Charming.
But in this case, I'm gonna ask to summarize a transcript in a few different ways. The first
Hmm.
thing I want is I want the top 5 or 6 kind of like takeaways, right? So a summary of what was part of that transcript, and then I'm going to ask for 100 character or less um, title, because YouTube limits to 100 characters or less, right? And
Okay.
I often don't like the title it gives me, so I've started to ask to do 2 titles.
Hmm.
Um, for whatever reason,
Why not?
it's just a little better. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you actually need the description for the video. Oh, okay. Summary. So, and then I'm going to ask for 3 different 7-word or less titles that I could use in a thumbnail. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, if I say, here's the transcript. Now, the other thing is, I cannot do an hour-long transcript. Okay. I can only do about 10 minutes worth of transcription before it flakes out. So
Right.
what I'll do is I'll use the chapter. So this is the transcript. I dump the transcript to a text file. Okay. So here's this section, working with sponsors of your open source project and foundation. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead, and it's about an 8-minute segment, it looks like. Goes from about 8 minutes to about 16. And I'm going to put that transcript, just paste it right in. And so we'll just let this run. So what are my bullet point takeaways? Okay. So based on the transcript that was talked about, here's what it says. MariaDB Foundation aims to increase adoption and openness, expanding and diversifying the sponsor base, working with cloud service providers, big techs, and government initiatives. MariaDB Corporation is a major sponsor of the foundation. MariaDB Foundation focuses on merging, reviewing, and improving contributions. And we'll also talk about navigating sponsors' priorities and ideas. It's not really a major challenge. The 2 titles that it's suggesting, okay, kind of fit what that thing was about, and then it's going to generate that SEO optimized summary for me.
Okay, cool.
So what's interesting is, I mean, these aren't perfect, and I've had to tweak them.
Yeah, of course.
But there's a couple cases where I've done this, and I've dropped like a video, like introducing, be like introducing you, Richard, like saying like, oh, introduction to Richard Simon, and I've noticed that some of the videos actually show up in the top of Google search for that person's name.
Right.
So evidently it's doing a good enough job, right?
Yes.
And so, it's a way to kind of like help boost that kind of like get something written very quickly. Use what has already been talked about as a potential description for your videos, especially if you have a lot of them that you're going to release, that you might want to spend more time on the major release, like the hour-long one, write that yourself. And then use the smaller clips. If you could just do the transcription, dump the transcription into ChatGTP.
Yeah, and I think this would, I would actually see this helping with those longer ones. If we can actually kind of get all the transcript in, this would actually really help with those hour-long ones.
So
because I would say, if when I do those, I try not to stop the recording unless the guest asks me to stop the recording for whatever reason. We would do it, so at least I have a kind of a beginning and end, and then I can just edit that, for my requirements. But I think this would certainly help to streamline a lot of the kind of the editing, the excerpts that you want to take out. And if you do want to put out something that's like a preview of the interview or something like that, or you just want to break down the an hour long or whatever type of video, because it will also allow you to basically regurgitate the content. One of the things that everybody will tell you on YouTube is that you've got to try and reuse your content, at least twice, so the original and one more time in some other way, in some other way, whether it's an excerpt or whatever it is. So the more that you can, I think, regurgitate the original recording in different formats and use it in different ways, the more content you'll be able to release with that original effort that you put in.
Yeah. By the way, I just asked to pick an interesting quote, and it did for me as well.
Yeah. And that would be like that 30-second short that you can throw in or something. Yeah, YouTube short. Exactly. Yeah, and that would be very, it kind of brings you closer to it. And then you can okay, that's the bit I need then, and you can go and wrap around that whatever it is that you need to do to get it out on YouTube Shorts or something like that.
I asked it to write me a tweet as well. There you go, with hashtags.
Cool. Yeah, there you go.
Anyways,
perfect.
So this is where it gets a little like, so this is actually, obviously the interface. So I've been playing around with this. You can actually see on the left side, like, I've put in some of the other podcasts and whatnot, and played around with, can you generate an article based on a transcript? And I didn't like how the tone of the article or the blog was. It was just too markety, gimmicky. So I didn't like, I was like, yeah, maybe it's got to use some work, or maybe I got to fix the prompt, whatever. But,
right.
okay. I don't have a problem writing a blog myself. But where this gets kind of interesting is, you mentioned like the longer videos. Okay. So if I have like 10 clips from one longer video, if there is a limit, I could take each of the transcripts summaries and then combine them and then say, write me a summary of the summaries. And you could do it that way, because you really don't want more than, let's say, a 500 word or even like a couple 100-word summary for your YouTube video.
Yeah. And also for the long ones, unless you're maybe someone like me who kind of does sort of generate notes or a very loose script or an agenda for kind of what we want to talk about, and that's not it's not something that you read off of, but it's something that it helps me to kind of stay on topic. Mainly because I can't really remember things, I'll forget, or we'll go off on a tangent with the guest, and then we kind of forget the main subject. So but if you're not doing that and you kind of end up doing that sort of hour and a half, like I said, panel discussion or something, you might want to use some of these types of tools. Say, what was it actually I said in that, or what was did the guest ever talk about DevSecOps, or can you isolate all of the DevSecOps segments and kind of generate me videos, so you could kind of do that, and then you can go, okay, so out of that hour and a half, there were 3 times when DevSecOps was mentioned by guest B and guest Z or something, and you kind of go, okay, right, so let me put all of those together, and then that will be a kind of an opinion on DevSecOps, and then you kind of string those 3 video segments, and put that out.
Okay.
As a kind of an opinion on DevSecOps or something.
So here's where I'm going to try this. Okay. So right now this is using the UI, but the API, I think, allows you to use more tokens, so I can use bigger like text segments.
Right.
But what I should be able to do is take the transcript as a text file, parse it up with Python, and then call the API for each section. And then if I needed to break it into like 10 sections, do each summary 10 sections, I could then add them together, then send that back in to get the piece back. So I think I can automate that entire process. So I don't even need to go in here and ask those questions. I should just be able to cut and paste. But I'm now exploring building the thumbnails based on this. Okay. So like when I say like MariaDB, like the 7-word or less titles, right? So here we go. These 3 titles that it generated. I'm using this kind of style where it's just like, if you look at these thumbnails in the middle here, it's just like, a 3-line kind of like thing with a picture of who the guest is, and then it's got the overall background. So I asked the wonderful AI to write me a quick Python script to add a title, and then it generated something that didn't work quite right, but it wasn't able enough. It was close enough where I could modify it to get it what I needed to do. So what I did was I actually have this where I took a guest photo. So this is Kai. Okay. And this is the normal kind of like layout. Okay. And so I have this Python script now that our favorite AI tool there helped generate originally. So here we go. And so now I can take those titles, and so here's the 3 titles that it gave. Okay, so it gave those 3 titles, and I can say, for instance, okay, I break them up based on basically a comma delimited format. And so let's just go ahead, and we're gonna generate those thumbnails based on what ChatGPT gave me. So let's say boom, and diverse. How's that look? Yeah, sure, why not? So I could do this where if I'm using the API, this could automatically be put in the right format, right?
Yeah.
So this is really less than an hour's work of time this week to do this. So, all right.
Mm-hmm.
So there we go. I'm going to save that. There are the 3 titles that ChatGPT generated for me for this particular thing. Now, if I go to the command line and I do Python, okay, so run that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of a sudden, I've got the outputted images. Okay. So
Yeah.
there we go. It built the images for me for my thumbnail.
Cool. Yeah.
For each one of those. So I think if I can automate this whole thing, it could literally be like transcript, dump the transcript to a text file, run a Python command that automatically goes out to ChatGPT, gets the summaries that I want for YouTube, gets the titles, gets selected potential titles for that particular episode from a thumbnail perspective, and then builds the thumbnails for me. And I should be able to do that in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, that would certainly help to automate a lot of that stuff that we, creators in general would normally have to sit down and kind of,
I don't
do
know.
manually.
It might not work. I don't know. Like, it's just something that I was thinking about this week. It started to experiment with. I've started to play around with, like titles and things being generated by the transcript the last couple weeks. I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Maybe we can kind of revisit it and see how you're getting on. I mean, certainly, I think it's if we can get somebody to just focus on content creation, video creation, kind of use these tools to make these things as kind of automated for us, and that'll be really useful to do. And I certainly would look into that if that was the case. Definitely.
I don't know.
And it helps, like I said, it will help with those longer videos when you've got a lot of content in there. I mean, even if you can just kind of, like I said, isolate certain topics and who said what and how many times the word DevSecOps was said, and can you isolate that segment where DevSecOps was mentioned, and then can you string those 3 segments or whatever segments together, all those excerpts together, and then give me a title, do some of the SEO for me, then that's kind of 60-70% of the way there to do it. The only thing you would need to do is obviously make sure that it didn't pull in anything crazy, and
you're going to have to review these. You can't just blindly throw them out there.
You'll have the creative kind of control over that bit, and then but that's easy enough. All right. No, that's cool. I like that.
Anyways, that's my demo for the day. For those who watch,
that's the demo. That's
I don't know. We'll see if it evolves. I don't know if I'll get time to like actually message up, but you can kind of see where my thinking is.
No, I can definitely see that, and that would be extremely useful. And that's kind of got me thinking in other different directions as well. And maybe we should revisit that and see how to kind of what we're doing.
Or we could do a live coding session to finish that up.
We could ask people to actually send us their stuff and what do you want to do, and then
ChatGPT to do this for me. Just can you build me?
And we'll just ask
a complete tool that calls the API, breaks this up. I bet I could, but anyways. But Richard, it looks like we're about out of time for the day.
Always time always runs out when you're having fun.
Yes. So hopefully, people will find this video, they'll like it, they'll want to hang out with us next time. They'll come on and they'll share tips and tricks that they have. We want to learn from each other. We are definitely not the super wide, influencer, folks. We're just like open source and like to talk about it.
So indeed.
All right, Richard. Until next time.
Thank you, Matt. I'll speak to you next time.
All righty. Don't forget to subscribe, and you'll know when we come back on.
Please do. Please do.
All righty.